4 billion years ago, Earth was a world unrecognizable. No forests, no soil, no breath of oxygen in the air, just rock, water, and a restless sky crackling with storms that had no one to witness them. And yet, somewhere in that violent beginning, something happened that had never happened before. The first emergence of life. Not life as we know it now, not flowers or fish or anything with a heart, but something simpler, something that could replicate itself, something that could take the raw ingredients of a dead planet and turn them into the first stirring of existence. The question is, where? Where on this ancient Earth did chemistry cross that invisible line into biology? Where did the first spark catch fire? For more than a century, scientists have been searching for that place, that cradle, that original address of life. And the ocean, vast, deep, and ancient, has always been the prime suspect. But the ocean is not one place, it's many. And each of those places tells a different story about how life might begin. Imagine for a moment the floor of the young ocean, 2 miles down, maybe 3, a place where sunlight has never reached and never will. The water here is cold, heavy, silent. But beneath the seafloor, something is moving. The planet's interior is still molten, still churning with heat, left over from Earth's violent birth. And where that heat meets seawater, the crust cracks open, hydrothermal vents. These are not the dramatic black smokers you might picture, those towering chimneys belching superheated water and minerals into the abyss. Those exist, yes. But there's another kind of vent, quieter, gentler, alkaline. At alkaline vents, warm water rises through rock, carrying with it hydrogen and methane, gases that ancient microbes would later learn to feast on. The water is not scalding, it's lukewarm, almost welcoming. And here's the remarkable part. These vents create natural chemical gradients. On one side of a mineral wall, the ocean is slightly acidic. On the other, the vent fluid is alkaline. That difference in chemistry, that push and pull between acid and base, creates a flow of protons across the barrier, a flow of energy. It's almost exactly like what happens inside every living cell today. Our cells use proton gradients to generate the energy molecule ATP, the fuel of life. And here at these ancient vents, nature was doing the same thing without life. This is why some scientists believe hydrothermal vents were Earth's first energy factories. Not just a place where life could survive, but a place where life could be built, where chemistry had everything it needed: energy, structure, and time. Down here, there were no storms, no radiation, no chaotic cycles of day and night, just steady, patient chemistry in the dark. A kind of order in the chaos. But not everyone is convinced. Because while the deep ocean offered stability, it also offered isolation. And some scientists argue that life needed more than just calm. It needed variety. It needed cycles. It needed the kind of dynamic environment that only the surface could provide. Picture instead a shallow pool at the ocean's edge, a tide pool. The sun beats down on it. The water warms, evaporates, concentrates. Whatever organic molecules are floating in that pool, amino acids, sugars, fragments of RNA, they're being pressed closer together, reacting, bonding, experimenting with new combinations. Then the tide comes in. Fresh seawater floods the pool, dilutes it, resets the experiment. Then the tide goes out again. This is the rhythm of the surface world. A rhythm of concentration and dilution, drying and wetting, light and dark. And it's the rhythm that Charles Darwin imagined when he wrote, almost casually, about a warm little pond where life might have first assembled itself from simpler chemicals. Darwin never called it the origin of life. He was more careful than that. But the idea stuck because it made sense. Life needs building blocks, yes, but it also needs something to shake those blocks together. And the surface of the early Earth was nothing if not restless. Young sun, violent weather, a planet still cooling from its formation. It was a chaotic place. But maybe that chaos was exactly what chemistry needed to stumble again and again towards something that could finally hold itself together. So which is it? The stable darkness of the deep, where energy flows naturally through mineral walls and time stretches out undisturbed? Or the chaotic sunlight of the surface, where molecules are battered by cycles and concentrated by evaporation and exposed to the raw energy of a young star? This is the great debate at the heart of origin of life science, and it's not just an academic argument. It's a question about what life is, about what conditions allow complexity to emerge from simplicity. Because life is both things, isn't it? It's stability, the careful replication of DNA, the steady hum of metabolism, but it's also instability, mutation, adaptation, the ability to survive in environments that want to tear you apart. Maybe life needed both. Maybe it began in the calm of the vents, where the first metabolic pathways could stabilize, and then it migrated upward toward the light, where evolution could begin in earnest. Or maybe it started in the chaotic pools, and only later retreated to the depths when the surface became too hostile, too bright, too oxidizing, too alive with competition. We don't know yet, but the ocean remembers. Somewhere in its chemistry, in the way certain microbes still live at vents, in the way tide pools still concentrate and dilute, somewhere in all of that, there's a memory of the beginning. And then there's the other possibility, the one that feels almost like science fiction, but refuses to go away: panspermia. The idea is simple, even if the implications are staggering. What if life didn't begin on Earth at all? What if it began somewhere else, on Mars perhaps, when that planet still had oceans of its own, and arrived here as a passenger, riding on a meteorite blasted into space by an asteroid impact, drifting through the void for millions of years, and then crashing into Earth's young ocean, carrying with it the seeds of something that had already learned to survive. It sounds far-fetched. But we know it's possible. We've found Martian meteorites on Earth. We know that microbes can survive in space, at least for a while, encased in rock. We know that the early solar system was a violent place, with impacts constantly flinging material from one world to another. So maybe life is older than Earth. Maybe it's a traveler. And maybe the ocean wasn't the birthplace of life at all, just the nursery where something ancient and foreign finally found a home. This is panspermia's whisper, not a roar, not a proven theory, just a quiet suggestion that the question of where life began might be bigger than we thought, that the cradle might not be a place on this planet at all, but a process spread across worlds and time. So we're left with mystery. The hydrothermal vents hum in the dark, patient and eternal, offering gradients and hydrogen and the promise of stability. The tide pools shimmer in the sun, wild and unpredictable, concentrating chemistry with every evaporation, resetting with every wave. And far above, meteorites still fall, carrying with them the faint possibility that life is not a singular event, but an inheritance. Where does life prefer to begin? Chaos or calm, darkness or light? We don't know, not yet. But the ocean holds the answer. Somewhere in its depths, or at its sunlit edges, or perhaps in the memory of something that arrived from beyond, somewhere, the first spark still glows. And if we're patient, if we listen closely enough, the ocean will tell us where it all began. But first, we have to understand what life needed to survive once it arrived. There's something unsettling about watching chemistry pretend to be alive. Drop a fatty acid into water, and it will do something unexpected, without instruction, without intention. It will fold in on itself, curl around, and form a sphere, a bubble, a membrane. The ocean, it seems, has always known how to build walls. These structures are called vesicles, tiny pockets of water wrapped in a skin of molecules that naturally arrange themselves with their water-loving heads facing outward and their water-fearing tails tucked safely inside. No one tells them to do this, no blueprint, no enzyme guiding the assembly. They just do it. Because in water, this is the most stable arrangement, the lowest energy state, and nature, left to its own devices, always drifts towards stability. So, picture the early ocean, rich with organic molecules, fatty acids drifting in the current, and wherever conditions were right, wherever concentration and temperature and chemistry aligned, these molecules would spontaneously organize. Bubbles forming in the dark, membranes wrapping around, nothing, or perhaps around fragments of RNA or clusters of amino acids that happen to be nearby. The ocean trying again and again to package itself into something contained, something separate from the vastness around it. This is how the first cells might have begun. Not as living things exactly, but as accidents of chemistry that looked, from a distance, almost like life. Almost. But a bubble on its own is fragile. It forms, it drifts, it bursts, to become something more, to become something that could last, that could grow, that could eventually evolve. These early vesicles would have needed help. Help from the Earth itself. Scientists have discovered that certain minerals act as scaffolds for chemistry, clay for instance. Its layered structure can trap organic molecules between its sheets, holding them in place, concentrating them, giving reactions time to happen that might otherwise never occur. At hydrothermal vents, the chimneys aren't smooth. They're riddled with tiny pores, microscopic chambers carved by the flow of water through rock. And inside those chambers, chemistry becomes protected, organized. A reaction that might dissipate in the open ocean can persist inside a pore. Molecules accumulate, concentrations build, and suddenly, chemistry that seemed impossible becomes inevitable. These mineral surfaces don't just hold molecules, they guide them. Some minerals catalyze reactions, speeding them up, steering them in particular directions. The mineral becomes a kind of hand, shaping the chemistry it touches. Life didn't invent catalysis, the rocks did. And perhaps in those early days, before enzymes existed, before proteins had learned to fold, the ocean relied on stone to do what biology does now, to organize, to accelerate, to remember. Because here's the strange part, you don't need to be alive to behave like something living. There are chemical cycles, loops of reactions that feed into themselves, sustaining their own existence, that can emerge spontaneously under the right conditions. You start with molecule A. It reacts to form molecule B. B reacts to form C, and C, under certain conditions, can catalyze the formation of more A. A loop, a cycle, a system that sustains itself. It's not alive. It has no DNA, no metabolism in the biological sense, but it persists, it propagates. And if you disturb it, if you introduce a variation, the cycle might adapt, shift, find a new equilibrium. This is what scientists call autocatalysis, chemistry that feeds on itself. And in the early ocean, these cycles might have been everywhere, reactions flickering on and off, some lasting only moments before collapsing, others stabilizing, finding a rhythm, persisting long enough to drift into new environments where they might encounter other cycles, other reactions, other almost living chemistries. And occasionally, very occasionally, two systems might merge, or one might capture another, or a cycle inside a vesicle might stabilize in a way that made the vesicle itself more stable, layer by layer, accident by accident, chemistry learning to behave like biology. It's eerie when you think about it, this boundary between life and non-life, this gray zone where chemistry becomes self-sustaining but not yet self-aware, not yet even self-replicating in the way we'd recognize. We like to think of life as something that either is or isn't, a line you cross, a switch that flips. But the ocean suggests otherwise. It suggests that life emerged gradually, not as a single moment of creation, but as a slow accumulation of chemical tricks, vesicles forming spontaneously, minerals organizing reactions, cycles stabilizing and persisting. And somewhere in that accumulation, after millions of years of trial and error, something crossed a threshold we still don't fully understand. Something that could not only sustain itself, but copy itself, improve itself, remember what worked and discard what didn't. That was life. But before that, before the first true cell, there were these shadows, these almost living systems, bubbles full of chemistry that replicated without understanding, that evolved without intending to. The first cell that never lived. Or maybe it did live in its own way. Maybe we just don't have the language yet to describe what it was. So the ocean filled with these experiments, vesicles drifting through the dark, mineral pores cradling reactions, cycles sustaining themselves on gradients and gases, and the patient, relentless flow of chemistry toward order. It was a world on the edge of life, a world where the rules were still being written, where every tide pool, every vent, every crack in the seafloor was a laboratory running its own experiment. Most of them failed. The bubble burst, the cycle collapsed, the reaction ran out of fuel, but some didn't fail. Some persisted just long enough, adapted just enough, found themselves in the right place at the right moment with the right combination of chemistry and structure and luck. And those are the ones we remember. Those are the ones that learned the next trick, the trick that everything alive still uses, the trick of harvesting energy. But a bubble and a reaction aren't enough. Life needs energy, and the ocean knew exactly where to get it. In the dark, the Earth was already breathing, not with lungs, not with anything we'd recognize as respiration, but breathing nonetheless. Rock and water, meeting in the deep. And from that meeting, energy. There's a process that happens beneath the seafloor, ancient, invisible, constant. Water seeps down through cracks in the oceanic crust, down through layers of basalt and peridotite, rocks rich in iron and magnesium left over from Earth's formation. And when water meets these rocks, something remarkable happens. The rocks crack open at the molecular level. Oxygen atoms are transformed. And in that transformation, hydrogen gas is released. This is serpentinization, the slow, patient turning of stone into something else, into serpentine minerals that give the process its name, into methane, into warmth, and most importantly, into hydrogen, fuel for chemistry that was waiting in the dark. It's not fire, it's not combustion, but it is, in every meaningful sense, energy being born from stillness. Water meets rock, hydrogen is born, chemistry becomes motion, and life, or the chemistry that would become life, was listening. Follow that hydrogen upward, through the fractured crust, through channels and chambers carved by the flow of heated water. Eventually, it reaches the seafloor, and there it emerges. Hydrothermal vents. But not all vents are the same. The ocean has built different engines, different factories, each with its own way of turning geology into chemistry, into the possibility of life. There are the black smokers, dramatic, violent almost. Superheated water, sometimes exceeding 700 degrees Fahrenheit, blasting up through the crust, carrying with it a payload of dissolved metals and sulfur compounds. When that water hits the cold ocean, everything precipitates at once. The metals solidify instantly, forming towering chimneys that billow black plumes into the abyss. It looks like smoke, like the exhaust of some subterranean furnace. And in a way, that's exactly what it is. These are places of extreme chemistry. The water is too hot for most life as we know it, but not for all life. There are microbes, hyperthermophiles, that have learned to thrive here, feeding on the sulfur and metals, metabolizing conditions that would destroy almost anything else. Could life have begun here? Perhaps. The energy is abundant, the chemistry is rich. But the violence of it, the sheer heat, the rapid fluctuations, makes it a difficult cradle, a place where chemistry might burn too fast to organize, where reactions might race ahead of structure. But there's another kind of vent, quieter, gentler, alkaline vents, The water here is warm, not scalding, around 90 degrees Fahrenheit, comfortable if you could somehow stand there in the crushing pressure and the absolute dark. The chimneys are different too, pale, porous, made of carbonate minerals rather than sulfides. They don't billow black smoke. They seep, they breathe. And here's what makes them extraordinary. They create natural batteries. On one side of the vent structure, seawater, slightly acidic from dissolved carbon dioxide. On the other side, vent fluid, alkaline, rich in hydrogen and methane. That difference in pH creates a gradient, a flow of protons across the mineral walls, an electrical potential, a source of energy that doesn't require sunlight, doesn't require oxygen, doesn't require anything but rock and water and chemistry. It's almost exactly the same mechanism that every living cell uses today to generate ATP. The same proton gradient, the same fundamental trick. Which raises an extraordinary possibility. What if life didn't invent this process? What if life inherited it? What if alkaline vents were already running the machinery of metabolism before life arrived, and early cells simply learned to replicate what the Earth was already doing? Lightless factories, each with its own recipe for powering life, and chemistry paying attention. Because here's the thing that keeps scientists awake at night. You don't need DNA to have metabolism. Metabolism is older than that, more fundamental. It's a cycle, a loop of chemical reactions that takes raw ingredients, carbon dioxide, hydrogen, simple molecules, and turns them into more complex compounds, organic molecules, the building blocks of life. And then those building blocks can feed back into the cycle, sustaining it, amplifying it. This is what's called a metabolic cycle. And the most famous one, the one that might have been Earth's first, is the reverse Krebs cycle, or something like it. In your cells right now, the Krebs cycle is running forward, breaking down food to extract energy. But run it backward, and it does the opposite. It builds molecules. It takes carbon dioxide and hydrogen and assembles them into organic compounds. And here's the astonishing part. This reverse cycle can happen spontaneously in the right conditions. No enzymes needed, no genetic code, just the right minerals, the right gradients, the right flow of chemistry. At hydrothermal vents, some scientists believe this cycle was already turning, driven by the hydrogen rising from serpentinization, catalyzed by iron and nickel in the mineral walls, sustained by the endless flow of seawater bringing fresh carbon dioxide, metabolism before genes, cycles before cells, chemistry that replicated itself not through DNA, but through its own internal logic. Because if a reaction produces a molecule that helps the reaction happen again, then the reaction will happen again, and again, and again. It becomes self-sustaining, self-propagating. Not life exactly, but something close, something that evolution could work with. This is the metabolism first theory, the idea that life didn't begin with a molecule that could copy itself, that came later, but with a cycle that could sustain itself. A chemical engine in the dark, learning in its own way. Because cycles that worked persisted, cycles that didn't collapsed. And over millions of years, the ocean became a library of these engines, some simple, some complex, some stable enough to last, some flexible enough to adapt. And eventually one of them, or maybe a collaboration of several, stumbled into the next great trick, the trick of memory, of encoding its own instructions, of passing down not just chemistry, but information. But that came later. First, the ocean had to build engines, had to learn to breathe, had to discover that in the dark, between rock and water, there was power enough to start a world. So the vents kept breathing, hydrogen rising, gradients flowing, cycles turning. And somewhere in all that quiet motion, in all that patient chemistry, something began to organize. Not just molecules anymore, not just reactions, something that could hold itself together, something that could persist, something that could eventually remember. The engines were running, and life was learning to drive them. There's someone you need to meet, someone who lived so long ago that the Earth itself would barely recognize the world they inhabited, someone who never built cities or spoke languages or looked up at stars and wondered what they were, someone who, nonetheless, is your ancestor, and mine, and every living thing's. We call them LUCA, the last universal common ancestor. Not the first life, that's important to understand. LUCA was not the spark that started it all. There were almost certainly other forms of life before, simpler chemistries, earlier experiments, lineages that flickered and died, leaving no descendants, no trace, no memory. Life may have started many times, in many places, through many different accidents of chemistry and circumstance. But LUCA was the one that worked, the first successful life, the one whose descendants survived every catastrophe, every extinction, every billion years of planetary change, the one whose genetic code became our genetic code, whose metabolic pathways we still carry in our cells. When you look at the tree of life, that vast branching diagram of all living species, trace it backward. Follow the branches down through mammals and reptiles, through fish and insects, through fungi and plants, through bacteria and archaea. Keep going. Keep collapsing the branches, back and back and back. And eventually they all converge, all of them, every leaf on the tree, every species that has ever lived, every form of life that walks or swims or photosynthesizes or breathes. They all meet at a single point, LUCA. So who were they? What did LUCA look like? How did they live? What was their world? We'll never find a fossil. LUCA was almost certainly too small, too soft, too simple to leave any physical trace. But they left something more durable than bones. They left instructions, DNA, genes, the molecular blueprints that every living thing still uses. And by comparing the genomes of modern organisms, bacteria from deep-sea vents, archaea from salt flats, algae, fungi, animals, everything, scientists can work backward. They can identify which genes are universal, which proteins appear in every branch of the tree. Those are the ones LUCA had, the original toolkit. And when you reconstruct that toolkit, you get a portrait, not of what LUCA looked like, but of how they lived, what they needed, what environment they called home. Here's what we know. LUCA had a membrane, a boundary that separated inside from outside. They were a cell. Simple, yes, but contained. Organized. They had ribosomes, the molecular machines that translate genetic code into proteins. The same ribosomes, in essence, that are working inside your cells right now. They had a genetic code, DNA or RNA. Scientists still debate which came first, but information storage, the ability to remember, to pass instructions from one generation to the next. And they had metabolism, chemical pathways that extracted energy from their environment. Not photosynthesis, that came later. LUCA lived in a world without sunlight, but they knew how to metabolize hydrogen. They knew how to work with carbon dioxide. They had enzymes built around iron and sulfur clusters, ancient chemistry, the kind you'd find at hydrothermal vents. LUCA, it seems, was born in the deep. But here's where it gets complicated. Here's where the portrait blurs. Because when scientists look at LUCA's genes, they find something unexpected. Some of those genes suggest a life adapted to extreme heat, a thermophile, something that thrived at temperatures approaching the boiling point of water. The kind of conditions you'd find at black smokers, at the most intense hydrothermal vents. But other genes suggest something more moderate, a life that could tolerate heat, perhaps, but didn't require it. Something that might have lived in gentler waters, at alkaline vents, or even in shallow oceans far from any vent at all. So which was it? Was LUCA born in fire and chaos, in the superheated plumes of black smokers, evolving in conditions so extreme that most modern life would boil alive? Or were they born in the calm warmth of alkaline vents, in porous mineral chambers where chemistry moved slowly, patiently, building complexity layer by layer. The debate continues, and maybe it's the wrong question. Maybe LUCA's ancestors inhabited one environment, and LUCA themselves another. Maybe life migrated. Maybe it adapted. Maybe the tree of life has roots in many soils. But what's clear is this: wherever LUCA lived, it was a place connected to the ocean's deep chemistry, a place where rock and water met, where hydrogen was abundant, where energy flowed not from the sun, but from the earth itself. LUCA was a child of the deep. And here's the part that should make you pause. Everything alive today carries LUCA's inheritance. The genetic code, the way DNA is read, the way RNA is transcribed, the way proteins are built, it's the same in every organism. Bacteria use it, whales use it, redwood trees use it, you use it. That code was invented once, by LUCA, or by something before LUCA, and it was so effective, so robust, that it never needed to change. 4 billion years of evolution, trillions of species, billions of mutations, endless experimentation with form and function, and survival strategy. But the code itself, the language of life, it remains. That's LUCA's legacy. The metabolic pathways, too, the ones your mitochondria use to extract energy from food, the ones plants use to fix carbon dioxide, the ones bacteria use to metabolize sulfur or nitrogen or methane. Trace them back, and their variations on ancient themes that LUCA already knew. LUCA didn't photosynthesize, didn't breathe oxygen. There was no oxygen yet. But they understood chemistry. They understood how to coax energy from gradients, how to cycle carbon, how to build complexity from simplicity, and every living thing since has been building on that foundation. We are, all of us, elaborations on LUCA's design. So imagine for a moment that you could meet them. You're standing, or floating really, in the deep ocean. The pressure is immense. The darkness is absolute. The only light comes from the faint glow of minerals precipitating from vent fluid, and there, clinging to the surface of a porous chimney or drifting in the gentle current near an alkaline seep, is a single cell. LUCA. Smaller than the smallest bacterium you've ever seen. No nucleus, no organelles, just a membrane, ribosomes, a strand of genetic material, and a few metabolic pathways running quietly in the dark. They don't know you're there. They don't know anything, really. Not in the way we think of knowing. But they're alive. And they're doing something that no other chemistry in the universe had figured out yet. They're remembering, not in their mind. They don't have one, but in their genes. They're encoding the instructions for their own existence. And when they divide, when they split into two cells, they pass those instructions forward. Memory as reproduction. Information as inheritance. This is what separates LUCA from everything that came before, from the chemical cycles and the self-sustaining reactions and the vesicles full of almost life. LUCA could remember, and because they could remember, they could evolve. And evolve they did. LUCA's descendants spread. Some stayed near the vents, adapting to hotter or cooler water, learning to metabolize different chemicals. Others drifted into the open ocean, finding new environments, new challenges, new opportunities. Some learned to use sunlight. Some learned to breathe oxygen once it appeared. Some became predators. Some became prey. Some formed colonies. Some invaded other cells and became organelles. The tree of life grew, and it kept growing, branching and branching and branching until the ocean, and eventually the land and the air, was filled with descendants of that single ancestor. LUCA didn't plan this. LUCA had no concept of legacy or future or the vast sprawling family tree they would leave behind, but they lived, and they remembered, and that was enough. So here we are, 4 billion years later, mammals walking on continents that didn't exist in LUCA's time, breathing an atmosphere LUCA would have found toxic, living under a sun that was dimmer then, orbiting through a galaxy that has rotated 30 times since LUCA divided for the first time. Everything has changed, except the code, accept the fundamental machinery, accept the fact that life still runs on chemistry inherited from the deep. When your cells generate energy, they use proton gradients, the same trick the vents were using before LUCA existed. When your DNA is read, it's translated by ribosomes that are, at their core, not so different from LUCA's. When you metabolize food, you're running pathways that have been refined and elaborated, yes, but never abandoned, never rewritten from scratch, because they work. They've always worked. And LUCA knew that in their own way, or at least LUCA's chemistry knew it. And that chemistry is still here, still functioning, still remembered. We talk about evolution as if it's a process of constant change, and it is. But it's also a process of conservation, of holding on to what works, of carrying forward the solutions that ancient life discovered in the deep. LUCA is not just our ancestor. LUCA is still with us, in every cell, in every breath, in every moment that chemistry sustains the impossibility of being alive, the first to remember, and the only one we've never forgotten. But LUCA didn't live alone in the ocean, and the deep didn't stay dark forever. We think we know what Earth looks like: continents and oceans, forests and deserts, cities spreading across the surface like constellations of light. We think of life as something that happens up here, in the sunlight, in the air, in the thin skin of habitable space between the ground and the sky. But we're wrong, because beneath our feet, beneath the soil, beneath the seafloor, beneath miles of solid rock, there is another world. A world we never see. A world most people don't know exists. A world that might contain more life than everything on the surface combined. Drill down through the ocean floor, through the sediment, through the basalt. Keep going. 1 kilometer down, 2 kilometers, in some places nearly 3. The pressure here is crushing. The temperature rises with every meter. The rock itself seems impenetrable, solid, ancient, lifeless. But it's not lifeless. Thread through the rock are fissures, fractures, pores barely wide enough for water to flow through. And in that water, carried on currents that move slower than glaciers, are microbes, bacteria, archaea, single cells clinging to mineral surfaces, metabolizing chemistry we're only beginning to understand, living in the absolute dark, in conditions we used to think were incompatible with life. They've been there for millions of years, maybe longer, some of them dividing so slowly that a single generation might last centuries. A forest of microorganisms in the dark, invisible, patient, thriving. This is the deep biosphere. When scientists first proposed its existence, it sounded like science fiction. Life kilometers below the surface, in solid rock, with no sunlight, no oxygen, no connection to the world above. Impossible, they said. But then we started drilling, started pulling up core samples from the deep crust, started examining them under microscopes. And there they were, cells, living cells, not fossils, not remnants, but active, metabolizing microbes doing chemistry in the deep. At first, we thought they were contamination, bacteria from the drilling equipment, surface life that had accidentally made its way down. But the more we looked, the more we found. And the DNA told a story. These weren't surface microbes. They were deep microbes, adapted to pressure, to heat, to darkness, to an existence we could barely imagine. They weren't contamination. They were natives. This was their home, and it always had been. How much life is down there? That's the question that keeps microbiologists awake at night, because the numbers are staggering, almost incomprehensible. Early estimates suggested that the biomass of the deep biosphere, the total weight of all microbial life beneath the seafloor, might equal the biomass of all life on the surface, all the forests, all the grasslands, all the animals and insects and fish and birds, all of it, matched cell for cell by microbes living in the dark beneath the crust. More recent studies suggest it might be even more than that the deep biosphere could contain twice as much carbon as all surface life, maybe more. It's a second planet, a shadow Earth, living beneath the one we know. And we've only just started to explore it. But how? How do they live down there? What do they eat? Where do they get their energy? Because that's the thing about life. It needs fuel. It needs something to metabolize. And there's no sunlight in the deep biosphere, no photosynthesis, no plants converting solar energy into chemical energy that animals can consume. There's only rock, water, and chemistry. And somehow, that's enough. This is chemosynthesis. Not photosynthesis, chemosynthesis. Life powered not by light, but by chemical reactions. The microbes in the deep biosphere have learned to extract energy from the most unlikely sources. Some metabolize hydrogen, the same hydrogen released by serpentinization, the meeting of water and rock. They combine it with carbon dioxide and extract energy from the reaction. Some feed on methane, some on sulfur, some on iron or manganese locked in the minerals around them. They're not eating food in any conventional sense. They're eating the planet itself, slowly, molecule by molecule, extracting energy from chemistry that's been happening in the crust for billions of years. And they're not alone in doing this. At hydrothermal vents, where the deep biosphere meets the open ocean, entire ecosystems have formed around chemosynthesis. Tube worms 6 feet long, with no mouth, no gut, surviving entirely on bacteria living inside them, bacteria that metabolize hydrogen sulfide from the vents, giant clams, eyeless shrimp, crabs clustering around black smokers. None of them eating each other initially, all of them ultimately feeding on chemistry, on energy that comes from rock and water and heat. This is life without sun, and it works. It's been working for billions of years. The deep biosphere isn't just surviving, it's thriving. Some of these microbes are dividing so slowly that you could watch a colony for a human lifetime and barely see it grow. Their metabolism is turned down to the faintest whisper. They're not in a hurry. They have time. Millennia, in some cases, to wait for the next molecule of hydrogen to drift past. The next slow seep of water through the rock. The next opportunity to extract another fragment of energy from the planet's chemistry. It's a different kind of life, a different pace, a different relationship with time itself. We think of life as something active, dynamic, fast. But down there, life is patience made cellular. And it's everywhere. Everywhere we've looked, we've found it. Beneath the Atlantic, beneath the Pacific, beneath continents where the crust is even thicker, even less accessible. Microbes living in rock that's been isolated from the surface for millions of years. Rock that was buried before humans existed, before mammals, before dinosaurs. And yet, life found a way in, or maybe it was already there. Maybe it never left. Because here's the thing that scientists are starting to realize. The deep biosphere might not be a refuge, a place life retreated to when the surface became inhospitable. It might be the original home, the place where life began, or at least one of the places. LUCA's descendants didn't all swim upward toward the light. Some stayed, some adapted to the deep. Some have been living there, unchanged in any fundamental way, for billions of years. While the surface world exploded with diversity, fish and forests and flight and consciousness, the deep biosphere just kept doing what it's always done. Metabolizing rock, dividing slowly, persisting. And here's what's truly humbling. We've barely begun to catalog it. We've drilled in a few dozen places, taken core samples from maybe 100 sites across the entire planet. That's it. The deep biosphere spans the entire globe. It extends beneath every ocean, beneath every continent. Millions of square kilometers, billions of cubic meters of rock. And we've sampled a fraction of a percent. Most of it is still unknown, unexplored, unnamed. There could be entire branches of the tree of life down there that we've never encountered, metabolisms we've never imagined. Microbes that have evolved in isolation for so long that their biochemistry barely resembles anything we've studied. A secret Earth, dwarfing the one we know, and it's been there the whole time, beneath our feet, beneath the waves, beneath the deepest trench and the highest mountain, living in the dark. So when we talk about the origin of life, when we ask where it all began, we have to remember this. The surface is not the whole story. The ocean we can see, the sunlit waters, the reefs, the teeming abundance of fish and whales and plankton, that's just the skin. Beneath it is a different ocean, a different world. One where life runs on chemistry older than oxygen, older than photosynthesis, older maybe than LUCA. And it's still there, still functioning, still teaching us that life is not what we thought it was, not fragile, not rare, not dependent on the narrow conditions we see on the surface. Life is chemistry that learned to persist. And chemistry can persist almost anywhere, in the dark, in the heat, in rock, in time measured not in years, but in ages. The deep biosphere forces us to expand our definition of what's possible. If life can thrive kilometers beneath the seafloor, metabolizing rocks with no connection to the sun, then where else might it exist? On Mars, beneath the frozen surface, in ancient aquifers we haven't reached yet? On Europa, Jupiter's moon, in the ocean beneath its ice shell, warmed by tidal forces and fed by chemistry at the rocky core? On worlds we haven't even discovered yet, orbiting distant stars? If life can exist in Earth's deep biosphere, then the universe suddenly seems much less empty. Because the conditions down there, darkness, pressure, isolation, chemistry, those aren't rare, those are common. There are more places like the deep biosphere in the universe than there are places like Earth's surface. And if life found a way to thrive in the world beneath the world, then maybe it's found a way to thrive elsewhere too. But for now, the deep biosphere remains one of the great frontiers, a place we're only beginning to understand, a place that challenges everything we thought we knew about where life can exist and how it can persist. It's humbling, really, to realize that for all our exploration, for all our drilling and diving and mapping, we've been living on a planet we barely know. And beneath us, in the quiet dark, an entire world has been breathing the whole time. Still breathing, still alive, still holding secrets we haven't even thought to ask about yet. But the deep wasn't the only place that learned to harness chemistry. Eventually, life found a way to turn light itself into fuel. Look up on a clear night. Find Jupiter if you can, that bright wandering star that moves slowly against the fixed constellations. From here, it's just a point of light. Beautiful maybe, distant certainly, but orbiting that giant, invisible to your naked eye, lost in the glare, are worlds with oceans, not on their surfaces, beneath their ice, beneath shells of frozen water, tens of kilometers thick, oceans that might be larger than Earth's, darker than Earth's, older, perhaps, than Earth's. And if we're right about what we've learned here, if the deep ocean really is where life prefers to begin, then those alien oceans might not be empty. Europa, Enceladus, Titan, Ganymede, moons we once thought were dead, frozen relics. Interesting only to geologists studying ancient craters and ice formations. But we were wrong. Because when our spacecraft flew close enough, when they looked carefully enough, they saw something unexpected. Activity. Europa's surface, up close, doesn't look ancient. It looks young. The ice is cracked, fractured, refrozen. Tectonic plates of ice shifting over something below. Something liquid. Enceladus, tiny, barely 500 kilometers across, has geysers, plumes of water vapor and ice crystals erupting from cracks near its south pole, shooting hundreds of kilometers into space. Titan has lakes, not of water, too cold for that, but of liquid methane and ethane. And beneath that, almost certainly, a water ocean hidden under the crust. Ganymede, the largest moon in the solar system, has a magnetic field, something only possible if there's a conductive layer inside, like a salty ocean. These aren't dead worlds, they're ocean worlds, and they're everywhere. But there's no sunlight down there, not beneath kilometers of ice, no photosynthesis, no food chain built on plants and algae, no connection to the star that warms the rest of the solar system. So where does the energy come from? Because energy is what life needs. Always. Energy to build, to replicate, to persist. And these moons, orbiting so far from the Sun, shouldn't have any. Except they do. It's called tidal heating, and it works like this. When a moon orbits a giant planet, Jupiter, Saturn, it feels the planet's gravity, strongly. The side of the moon facing the planet is pulled slightly harder than the side facing away. That creates a bulge, a stretch. The moon deforms just slightly under the strain. Now, if the moon's orbit were perfectly circular, that bulge would stay in the same place. The moon would settle into equilibrium, no problem. But the orbits aren't perfectly circular. Other moons pull on them. The giant planet's gravity tugs differently as the moon moves closer and farther. So the bulge moves. The moon flexes, stretches, and squeezes over and over with every orbit. And all that flexing generates heat, friction at the molecular level, rock grinding against rock, ice against ice. Deep inside the moon, the temperature rises, not from the sun, from gravity, from the relentless squeeze of orbiting a giant. It's enough, more than enough, enough to melt ice, enough to keep oceans liquid for billions of years, enough maybe to power life. Look at Enceladus again. That tiny moon, barely visible even in our best telescopes, shooting geysers into space. When the Cassini spacecraft flew through those plumes, actually through them, sampling the material, it found something extraordinary. Water, salty water, with organic molecules, complex carbon compounds, and silica, tiny grains of silicon dioxide, the kind that form when hot water interacts with rock at high temperatures, at hydrothermal vents, the same chemistry we see at Earth's hydrothermal vents, the same conditions, the same minerals precipitating from the same kind of reactions. Enceladus has vents. Down there, beneath the ice, at the bottom of an alien ocean, water is meeting rock, being heated by tidal friction, rising through the crust, carrying hydrogen, methane, organic molecules, building gradients, creating chemistry, doing everything that Earth's vents do, except it's happening on a moon 500 million kilometers away, a moon so small it could fit inside the continental United States. And if Enceladus has vents, then Europa probably does too. Ganymede, maybe others we haven't studied closely yet. So here's the question that keeps astrobiologists awake at night. If it happened here, why not there? If life emerged at Earth's hydrothermal vents, if LUCA's ancestors learned to metabolize hydrogen in the dark, learned to harness gradients, learned to replicate and remember, then why couldn't it happen again on Europa, on Enceladus, on any moon or planet with liquid water, chemical energy, and time? The chemistry is the same, the physics is the same, the energy sources are the same. There's nothing special about Earth's ocean. Not fundamentally. It's water, rock, heat, and chemistry. And that's not rare, that's common. This is what scientists call the principle of mediocrity. The idea that Earth isn't special, that we're not unique, that the conditions that led to life here are probably replicated countless times across the universe. It sounds almost insulting, mediocre, ordinary, not chosen, but it's liberating. Because if we're mediocre, if there's nothing exceptional about our planet's chemistry or our ocean's composition, then life isn't a miracle. It's not a one-time accident that will never happen again. It's a natural consequence of chemistry, an inevitable outcome when the right ingredients come together in the right conditions for long enough. And those conditions exist. Not just here, not just in one solar system around one average star, everywhere. There are more ocean worlds in our solar system than there are rocky planets. Think about that for a moment. Mars, Venus, Mercury, dry, either too hot, too cold, or long dead. But Europa, ocean. Enceladus, ocean. Ganymede, Callisto, Titan, possibly Pluto, possibly Triton? Oceans, all of them, hidden beneath ice, yes. Inaccessible to us for now, but there, liquid, persisting. And if that's true in our solar system, One system, 8 planets, dozens of moons. Then what about the rest of the galaxy? There are hundreds of billions of stars in the Milky Way, many of them with planets. Some of those planets with moons. How many ocean worlds are out there? How many places where water meets rock in the dark? Where tidal heating or radioactive decay or some other energy source keeps chemistry flowing? Where gradients form and molecules accumulate and time stretches out long enough for something to organize? We don't know. But the number isn't zero, and it probably isn't small. The universe, it turns out, is wetter than we thought. Water isn't rare. We find it everywhere we look. In comets, in asteroids, in the atmospheres of gas giants, in the ice caps of Mars. And where there's water, there's the possibility of chemistry, of gradients, of the same processes that built life here. We used to think life needed Earth-like conditions, a rocky planet in the habitable zone, just the right distance from its star, not too hot, not too cold. But the deep biosphere taught us something different. Life doesn't need the surface. It doesn't need sunlight. It doesn't need Earth's atmosphere or Earth's temperature. It needs water, chemistry, and energy. And those 3 things exist in far more places than we ever imagined. So when we think about the origin of life, we can't think small anymore. We can't think just about Earth's ocean, Earth's vents, Earth's tidal pools. We have to think about Enceladus, where plumes are erupting right now, carrying ocean water into space, where we could sample it. We have to think about Europa, where a vast ocean, possibly containing more water than all of Earth's oceans combined, has been liquid for billions of years beneath the ice. We have to think about worlds we haven't discovered yet. Moons, orbiting planets, orbiting stars we can barely see. Because if chemistry learned to become biology here, then it's probably learning the same lesson elsewhere, right now, in the dark, under alien ice. Imagine that moment, somewhere on Europa, at the bottom of an ocean no human has ever seen, warmed by tidal friction and the residual heat of the moon's formation. There is a hydrothermal vent. Water rises through fractured rock, hydrogen is released, minerals precipitate, gradients form, and in the pores of a mineral chimney or in a vesicle drifting through the plume, chemistry is organizing itself. Molecules are accumulating, reactions are cycling. Something is trying over and over to replicate. Not life yet, but almost. The same experiments that Earth ran 4 billion years ago, running again, on another world, in another ocean. Different details maybe, different minerals, different temperatures, different time scales, but the same fundamental process. Chemistry reaching toward complexity, toward memory, toward life. We might never know for sure, not in our lifetimes. Reaching those oceans would require drilling through kilometers of ice, building submarines that could operate in crushing pressure and absolute dark, searching millions of square kilometers of seafloor for something we wouldn't even recognize as life if we saw it. But we'll try. We're already planning missions. Landers for Europa, sample returns from Enceladus's plumes, submarines for Titan's methane seas. Slowly, carefully, we're learning to explore the alien oceans above us. And when we finally get there, when we finally send instruments into those waters, we'll be looking for the same things we found in Earth's deep ocean. Chemistry that sustains itself, gradients that power reactions, molecules that remember, life or the shadow of life, the experiments that precede it, the chemistry that makes it possible. Because here's what we've learned from Earth's ocean. Life isn't fragile. It's not confined to narrow conditions. It's not a delicate flower that only blooms under perfect circumstances. Life is chemistry that refuses to stop, that finds a way, that adapts to darkness, to pressure, to heat, to cold, to isolation that lasts for millennia. If it can happen in Earth's deep biosphere, kilometers beneath the seafloor, in rock that hasn't seen the surface in millions of years, then it can happen on Enceladus. If it can happen at Earth's hydrothermal vents, in the crushing pressure of the abyss, in water hot enough to scald, in chemistry we once thought was too extreme, Then it can happen on Europa. The universe is vast, and it's full of oceans, and those oceans are full of chemistry. We might not be alone. We might never have been. So when you look up at Jupiter again, or at Saturn with its rings catching the sunlight, remember what's hidden there. Worlds with oceans, oceans with vents, vents with chemistry, and chemistry, given time, has a way of becoming something more. The alien oceans above us aren't just ice and water and rock, they're possibility, and possibility, left alone long enough in the dark, has a way of coming alive. But even as we look outward to other worlds, we're still uncovering secrets in the ocean that started it all. Imagine a force so immense that it could crush a submarine like a tin can, a force that presses down on every surface, every molecule, every atom with the weight of an entire ocean. At the deepest point on Earth, the Challenger Deep in the Mariana Trench, the pressure is more than 15,000 pounds per square inch. 8 tons pressing down on an area the size of your thumbnail. It's difficult to even comprehend. We live our lives under 1 atmosphere of pressure, 14 pounds per square inch. It's so constant, so familiar, that we never feel it. But in the deep ocean, pressure increases by 1 atmosphere for every 10 meters you descend. At 1,000 meters, it's 100 atmospheres. At 5,000 meters, 500. At 11 kilometers down, at the very bottom, it's over 1,000 atmospheres. 1,000 times the pressure we experience at the surface. And yet, life is there. Pressure should be a wall, an absolute barrier that nothing can cross. Because pressure doesn't just press on the outside of things, it presses on the inside too, on the molecules themselves, on the proteins that make metabolism possible, on the membranes that hold cells together. At high pressure, molecules are forced closer together, their shapes change. The spaces between atoms shrink. Chemical reactions that work perfectly at the surface might not work at all in the deep. Proteins, in particular, should fail. These are the workhorses of life, the enzymes that catalyze reactions, the receptors that sense the environment, the channels that move molecules across membranes. And they work because of their shape, because they fold in precise 3-dimensional configurations that allow them to grab onto specific molecules and do specific things. But pressure distorts shape, compresses it, changes the angles and the distances and the delicate balance of forces that keep a protein stable. Under enough pressure, proteins should unfold, denature, stop working. Life should stop. But it doesn't. Because life learned something in the deep that we're only beginning to understand. It learned to bend instead of break. The proteins found in deep-sea organisms are different from their surface cousins. Not in their fundamental chemistry, they're still made of the same amino acids, still built by the same genetic code, but in their architecture, in the way they fold, in the subtle adjustments that make them resilient. Deep-sea proteins tend to have more flexible regions, loops and hinges that can compress under pressure without losing their overall structure. They sacrifice a little bit of rigidity for a lot more adaptability. They also use different amino acids in key positions, smaller ones mostly, ones that pack more tightly, that don't leave empty spaces inside the protein where water molecules could get squeezed in and cause problems. It's engineering at the molecular level, evolution finding solutions to problems that human engineers are still struggling to solve. And it works. These proteins don't just survive the pressure, they require it. Bring them to the surface, and they fall apart. The pressure they evolved under isn't a burden, it's a support, a framework they've learned to depend on. But proteins are only part of the story. Membranes, too, have to adapt. The lipid bilayers that surround every cell, that keep the inside separate from the outside, that control what enters and what leaves. At the surface, membranes are fluid. The lipid molecules slide past each other like oil. That fluidity is essential. It allows proteins to move, allows the membrane to flex, allows cells to change shape. But under pressure, membranes freeze. The lipids pack together so tightly they can't move. The membrane becomes solid, rigid, non-functional, unless, of course, you change the lipids. Deep-sea organisms use fats with different structures, more unsaturated bonds, more kinks in the chains, anything that prevents the molecules from packing too perfectly. They also incorporate different kinds of molecules, cholesterol analogs, specialized phospholipids, that act like molecular antifreeze, keeping the membrane fluid even under crushing pressure. Again, it's a solution, an adaptation, pressure as a problem that evolution solved over and over until the deep ocean was no longer hostile, but habitable. And then there's time. Because pressure doesn't just change how molecules are structured, it changes how they move, how they interact, how quickly reactions happen. At high pressure, chemical reactions slow down. The molecules are pressed so close together that they have less room to vibrate, less freedom to collide in the right orientation, less opportunity to overcome the energy barriers that separate reactants from products. Life in the deep moves slowly. Metabolism runs at a fraction of the speed it does at the surface. Growth takes longer. Reproduction takes longer. Everything takes longer. A deep-sea microbe might divide once in a decade, once in a century. We're still measuring, still trying to understand just how slow life can go and still remain life. But here's the paradox. Slow doesn't mean weak. Slow means efficient. Slow means enduring. These organisms aren't burning through energy, they're sipping it, extracting every possible joule from every molecule of hydrogen, every gradient, every chemical reaction. They're not in a hurry. They don't need to be. Because in the deep, there are no seasons, no storms, no sudden changes in temperature or light or food availability, just pressure, just darkness, just chemistry that flows at a steady, patient pace. And in that environment, speed is a liability. Speed wastes energy. Speed means you run out of fuel before the next meal arrives. Better to be slow, to endure, to outlast. Pressure, then, is both destroyer and creator. It crushes, but it also shapes, refines, selects for resilience in ways that no other force can. And the creatures that live under that pressure are unlike anything on the surface, not just in their biochemistry, but in their bodies, their forms, their strategies for survival. Take bioluminescence. In the deep ocean, where no sunlight penetrates, where darkness is absolute, many organisms have learned to make their own light. Not for seeing, at least not always, but for signaling, for communication, for attracting prey or confusing predators or finding mates. They use proteins called luciferins and enzymes called luciferases, a chemical reaction that produces light without heat, cold fire, glowing in the dark. Some fish have rows of photophores along their bodies, blinking patterns that identify species or advertise readiness to mate. Some squid can control their glow, flashing warnings or lures depending on what they need. Some bacteria glow constantly, living in symbiosis with larger organisms, providing light in exchange for nutrients. It's an entire visual language, an ecology of light in the darkest place on Earth. And it exists because pressure didn't crush it. Pressure allowed it. Created the conditions, the isolation, the darkness, the stability, where such adaptations could evolve. Then there are the bodies themselves, gelatinous, translucent, almost ghostly. Many deep-sea creatures have abandoned the need for heavy skeletons or thick muscles or rigid structures of any kind. Why invest in bone when there's no gravity to fight? When you're suspended in water, neutrally buoyant, drifting through currents? Why waste energy building defenses when predators are rare and encounters are slow and deliberate? Better to be soft, to be flexible, to move with the pressure rather than against it. So you get jellyfish the size of cars, salps that look like transparent barrels, amphipods with bodies so delicate they seem like they shouldn't exist at all, and yet they thrive at depths where the pressure would kill almost anything else. You get anglerfish with their absurd lures dangling in front of cavernous mouths, Gulper eels with jaws that unhinge impossibly wide. Vampire squid that aren't squid at all, but something stranger, something that doesn't fit into our surface categories. These aren't monsters, they're adaptations, solutions to problems we never face. And they're beautiful in their way. Darkly beautiful, shapes that pressure sculpted over millions of years. Even feeding strategies are different. On the surface, life is abundant. Predators chase prey. Herbivores graze on plants. There's energy everywhere, constantly cycling through the ecosystem. But in the deep, food is scarce, rare, unpredictable. Most of what falls from above, the dead plankton, the decomposing fish, the fragments of organic matter drifting down through the water column, most of it gets consumed long before it reaches the bottom. What does make it is treasure, manna from above. And when it arrives, every creature nearby converges. So deep-sea organisms have developed patience, waiting strategies. Some can go months without eating, years possibly. They don't waste energy hunting. They wait, they drift, they filter, they scavenge. And when food finally appears, they feed with a quiet efficiency. No chasing, no thrashing, just slow, methodical consumption. It's a different rhythm, a different relationship with survival. Pressure taught them that. But pressure isn't just a physical force, it's a selective pressure, an evolutionary sculptor. Everything about deep-sea life, from the proteins in their cells to the strategies they use to find food, has been shaped by the need to function under conditions that would obliterate most surface organisms. And the result is a kind of resilience we're only beginning to appreciate. These organisms can survive temperatures near freezing and near boiling. They can tolerate extreme acidity or alkalinity. They can metabolize compounds that would poison us. They're extremophiles, almost all of them. But they don't seem extreme to themselves. To them, the deep ocean is normal, expected, home. And we're the extremophiles, living in the thin, volatile, oxygen-rich skin of the planet's surface, unable to survive for even moments in their world. There's a lesson in that, a humbling one. We think of ourselves as the pinnacle of evolution, the most complex, most adaptable, most intelligent organisms Earth has produced. And maybe we are, in certain ways. But we're also fragile, dependent on narrow conditions, temperature, pressure, oxygen, food. Change any of them too much, and we fail. The microbes at the bottom of the ocean? They endure, they persist. They've been doing their chemistry, slowly and patiently, for billions of years, long before us, and probably long after. Pressure, then, is not the enemy of life. It's the sculptor, the teacher, the force that refined early organisms until they could function in the harshest environments imaginable. And maybe that's the real story of the deep ocean, not just that life began there, though it might have, but that life learned there, learned resilience, learned patience, learned to bend instead of break. And those lessons, encoded in proteins and membranes and metabolic pathways, are lessons that every organism carries, even us. Even here on the surface, breathing air and basking in sunlight, we're using biochemistry that was first tested under crushing pressure in the absolute dark. Because evolution doesn't forget, it builds, it layers, it carries forward every solution it ever found, and the solutions found in the deep are some of the oldest and strongest. So pressure shaped life, but it also protected it, because the deep ocean is stable, isolated, shielded from the chaos above, from asteroid impacts and climate shifts and mass extinctions. While the surface world burned and froze and changed and evolved, the deep stayed the same. And that constancy allowed something precious to survive, a memory of the beginning. We've traveled deep, through vents and gradients and the slow, patient chemistry of the abyss, through LUCA's first memories and the hidden forests beneath the seafloor, through alien oceans circling distant moons and the crushing pressure that sculpted resilience into every molecule. And now we surface, back to where we started, back to the question we've been circling all along. Where did life begin? But maybe that's the wrong question. Maybe the question isn't where life began, but what life is. Because the more we look, the harder it becomes to draw a line between the living and the not living, between biology and geology, between organism and ocean. Think about it. Every atom in your body was forged in a star. Carbon and oxygen and nitrogen, fused in nuclear fires billions of years ago, scattered across space when those stars died, eventually condensing into the dust that became Earth. You are made of stardust. That's not poetry. That's physics. But then those atoms fell to Earth, and Earth shaped them. Water dissolved them. Rock held them. Heat moved them. Chemistry organized them. For 1 billion years, maybe longer, the planet was a laboratory, running experiments in every tide pool, every vent, every crack in the seafloor, mixing and sorting and testing combinations. And eventually, one combination worked. One set of reactions became self-sustaining, self-replicating, self-improving, life. But where does Earth end and life begin? The minerals that catalyzed the first metabolic cycles, are they alive? No. But they made life possible. The proton gradients at hydrothermal vents, are they alive? No. But every cell still uses them. The hydrogen released by serpentinization, is it alive? No. But it powers chemosynthesis. It fuels the deep biosphere. It feeds organisms that have been metabolizing it for billions of years. Life didn't arrive from somewhere else and colonize a dead planet. Life emerged from the planet, as an expression of its chemistry, as a natural continuations of processes that were already happening. Biology is geology made persistent, and we are the proof. Every breath you take is an exchange with the atmosphere that ancient microbes created. Every molecule of ATP your mitochondria produce uses a mechanism inherited from hydrothermal vents. Every protein in your body folds according to rules that deep-sea organisms learned under crushing pressure. You are not separate from Earth, you are Earth, rearranged, organized, made aware of itself. When you think, you're using chemistry that began in the ocean. When you move, you're powered by gradients that the vents discovered first. When you grow, you're replicating molecules that LUCA passed down through 4 billion years of unbroken descent. You are an ancient thing, older than mountains, older than continents, older than the atmosphere you breathe, because the chemistry that makes you possible is older than all of that. So life didn't conquer Earth. Life is Earth, a particular kind of Earth, the kind that remembers, that replicates, that adapts and persists and evolves. But the boundary between that Earth and the Earth beneath it, the rock, the water, the chemistry, the boundary is thin, blurred, maybe non-existent. Maybe there never was a moment when life began. Maybe there was only a gradual transition. Chemistry becoming more organized, more persistent, more capable of memory, until one day it crossed some threshold we still don't fully understand and started calling itself alive. And if that's true, if life is just chemistry with memory, just Earth organizing itself, then the implications are staggering, because Earth isn't special, not in its composition, not in its chemistry. Water meeting rock, hydrogen being released, gradients forming, cycles stabilizing. That happens everywhere, on moons orbiting Jupiter, on planets orbiting distant stars, in places we haven't imagined yet. If life emerged easily here, and the evidence suggests it did, emerging within a few 100 million years of the planet, cooling enough to have liquid water, then life is not a miracle. It's not a singular accident that happened once and will never happen again. It's what chemistry does. Given time, given the right conditions, given water and rock and energy, chemistry organizes, chemistry persists, chemistry remembers. And we call that life. This is the principle of mediocrity carried to its logical conclusion. If Earth is ordinary, and life on Earth is a natural consequence of Earth's chemistry, then life itself must be ordinary, not rare, not special, expected. Wherever there are oceans, and there are oceans everywhere, there is probably life, or the chemistry trying to become life, or the remnants of life that once was. The universe is not empty, it's not sterile, it's not waiting for some rare miracle to populate it. It's full of chemistry, and chemistry wants to organize. We are not alone, we might never have been. But here's what makes Earth precious, even if it's not unique. This is where we are. This is the ocean that shaped us, the chemistry that learned to think and dream and wonder about its own origins. Other oceans might have done the same, might be doing it right now, under the ice of Europa, or in the depths of some exoplanet ocean we'll never see. But this ocean, Earth's ocean, is ours. It's our ancestor, our teacher, our memory. And it's still here, still functioning, still running the same chemistry it's been running for 4 billion years. The hydrothermal vents are still breathing, hydrogen still rises through serpentinized rock. Gradients still flow across mineral membranes. The deep biosphere is still metabolizing, slowly, patiently, dividing once a century, extracting energy from chemistry that most organisms will never see. The tide pools are still concentrating molecules, the minerals are still catalyzing reactions, the vesicles are still forming spontaneously wherever fatty acids meet water. The ocean hasn't stopped being a laboratory. It hasn't stopped experimenting. It's still alive, still creating, still running the same engine that powered LUCA, that powered everything that came after. The ocean is not just a habitat, not just a body of water where organisms happen to live. It's a memory, a blueprint, a process that has been continuous, unbroken, since the beginning. When you look at the ocean, you're not just looking at water. You're looking at the oldest living system on Earth. The only system that has persisted in some form since before life existed. The ocean was here when the first organic molecules formed. It was here when vesicles first wrapped around fragments of RNA. It was here when LUCA divided for the first time. It was here when photosynthesis began, when oxygen filled the atmosphere, when the first fish evolved, when our ancestors crawled onto land. It watched it all, shaped it all, made it all possible, and it's still here, still shaping, still possible. So maybe we've been thinking about this wrong the whole time. Maybe the question isn't, where did life begin in the ocean? Maybe the question is, when did the ocean begin to call itself life? Because the ocean has always been doing chemistry, complex chemistry, chemistry that cycles and replicates and adapts to new conditions. And at some point, that chemistry crossed a threshold, started encoding information in molecules, started building membranes, started remembering. But was that the moment life began? Or was it just the moment the ocean's chemistry became complex enough to recognize itself? We are, all of us, expressions of ancient chemistry shaped in deep black water, not created separately from the planet, not placed here by some external force, not miraculous exceptions to the laws of physics. We are what happens when the ocean thinks, when the wise chemistry of vents and gradients and minerals becomes organized enough to wonder about its own existence. Every question you've ever asked, every thought you've ever had, every moment of consciousness, that's the ocean asking questions about itself. That's ancient chemistry reflecting on its own history. That's Earth made aware. And if that's true here, then it's probably true elsewhere. Other oceans, other chemistries, other forms of organization we wouldn't even recognize as life. Maybe they're asking the same questions, wondering about their origins, looking up at their own skies, if they have skies, and asking, are we alone? The answer, we think, is no. Not because we've found anyone else yet, but because the chemistry doesn't care about us. It just does what chemistry does. It organizes, it persists, it remembers. And if it happened here, easily, quickly, inevitably, then it's happening elsewhere, right now, in the dark, under pressure, in alien oceans that have never known our sun, chemistry waking up, wondering, becoming. So where does that leave us? Standing on the shore of the ocean that made us, looking out at the waves, wondering what secrets still hide in the deep, knowing now that those secrets aren't just about the past, they're about the future, about what life could become, about what other oceans might be dreaming. The ocean gave us life, but it also gave us context. It showed us that we're part of something larger, something older, something that stretches across worlds and time. We are not the center, we are not the culmination, we are not the purpose. We are just one of the ocean's experiments, one of its stories, one of the ways chemistry learned to organize itself, and that's enough, more than enough, because we get to be here, in this moment, in this particular arrangement of atoms that allows us to think and feel and wonder. We get to look back at the ocean and understand finally where we came from, not from clay or divine breath or some separate act of creation, from chemistry, from gradients, from water meeting rock in the dark, from the ocean itself. Maybe life didn't begin in the ocean, maybe the ocean was already alive, and we are simply its latest story.